So there are some types of stress, and stress is a condition when the animal fails to achieve its full genetic potential. There are different kinds of stressors. It may be physical, nutritional, chemical, psychological, and cold and heat stress. In present scenario, the cold and heat stress is the most concerning threat for production and reproduction in livestock worldwide. Cold and heat stress decreases growth, reproduction, production, quality and quantity of milk, as well as it depresses the natural immunity of animals, and which makes the animals most vulnerable to diseases, and ultimately there may be death of the animals. The sheep and goat, they are homeothermic animals. And homeothermic animals, they try to maintain a constant body temperature with variation of climatic conditions. So when the thermoregulation fails, then we suffer stress. So this thermoregulation in homeothermic animals, which is maintained by the balance between heat gain and loss. So generally, there is a thermoneutral zone for all animals, and in case of sheep, that zone is 12 to 32 degrees centigrade, and in case of goats, the thermoneutral zone is 12 to 24 degrees centigrade. The thermoneutral zone is the zone where the animals maintain its full genetic potential, proper production and reproduction without any energy expenditure for maintaining its thermoregulation. This is the zone of thermal comfort. Here the animal will not experience any heat or cold, and it will able to express its full genetic potential. So sometimes when there will be heat stress, up to some extent, they will try to cope up, they will adapt themselves physiologically. And in the same way, in the cold stress also, up to some extent, they will try to adopt their body mechanism. So physiologically, there is a limit. So that is known as upper critical temperature as well as lower critical temperature. When the animal fails to maintain its upper critical temperature and lower critical temperature, beyond that, there will be death of the animal. So that heat stress can be estimated by temperature humidity index. Here, this is given by, there is will be a formula both for degree centigrade and degree Fahrenheit. And for that, we have to know the dry bulb thermometer temperature and again the relative humidity. And by finding the dry bulb thermometer temperature and relative humidity, we can find out the heat stress in animal. And if that value is equal to 25.6 or above that, we consider as extreme or severe heat stress. And beyond that, animal will fail to survive. And that estimation is of the heat stress is very important to measure the different type of stress conditions. It may be moderate, or it may be severe, or it may be extreme severe. So this is some slide of heat stress. So when the balance between heat production and heat dissipation will not be there, then we will suffer from heat stress. So most adjustments in the heat stress, which is done by dissipating heat to the environment and reducing the production of metabolic heat. So hyperthermia, that is result of decreased thermal gradient between animal and surrounding environment. And there will be heat loss. There are two types of heat loss, from the animal to the surrounding environment through the sensible heat loss, that comes under convection, conduction, and radiation. And again, there are some insensible heat loss, that is the wet heat loss. And when the sensible heat loss becomes less effective, the animal must rely on evaporative cooling and respiratory tract loss. These are the different effects during the heat stress. Obviously, there will be decrease in the feed intake efficiency and utilization, and there will be disturbances, water, protein, and energy mineral balances. And moreover, there will be some imbalance of hormonal secretion and blood metabolites, reduction in the fecal and urinary water losses. Sweating will be increased, as well as respiration and heart rate also, it will be increased. So when the physiological mechanisms of the animal fail to negate the excessive heat load, the rectal temperature increases. The increasing of 1 degree of rectal temperature is very, very harmful for the animals. So evaporation becomes most important avenue for heat dissipation. In sheep, due to wool coat sweating is less important than respiratory evaporation. So here we have shown a trend in descending order of sweating and panting animals in ascending order. So human is the most sweating, next horse, camel, cow, and after that there will be sheep and goat. And in the case of panting, also it will come in the middle. So both sweating and panting is equal in case of sheep and goat. So whenever the environmental temperature rise up above 36 degrees centigrade, the ears and legs of sheep and goats dissipate a high proportion of the heat. Because we know the sheep and goats ear and legs, it comprises almost 23% of animals' body surface area. So in case of sheep, again, respiratory response involves increased panting rate and followed by slower and deeper panting. As the ambient temperature approaches skin temperature, and then sensible heat loss decreases. So there is an anatomical and morphological rules of different type of animals in different areas. They have to adopt, and after following some rules. There are basically 4 rules. We know Golgar's, Pargman's, Allen's, and Wilson's rule. As per Golgar rules, so animals of warm region, they are having more melanin pigment than polar regions animal. So in the arid region also, they are having a few melanin pigment. And generally, as per Parkman's rule, so smaller breed size animal will be available in the warm area and larger breeds will be prevalent in the cooler areas. Because we know, so when the body size increases, the surface area decreases. So in the cooler region, they have to maintain less surface area for evaporative heat loss from the skin. Again, Allen's rules also very important. In the warmer areas, the animals, they are having very long hair and tails. And in that way, in the warmer areas, they have to dissipate heat through ears and tails. And in the cooler areas, generally, that body extremities are shorter to conserve more amount of heat. In the same way, as per Wilson's rule, the insulation cover increases, the hair length increases, fat tissue layer increases in cold areas. And in the warm region, there will be less insulation. So again, there will be some differences between goat and sheep. Generally, goats are more resistant and survive better than other ruminants in harsh environmental conditions. Besides, different adaptation mechanisms, and we have already discussed these adaptation mechanisms. There may be anatomical, there may be morphological, and there are so many physiological adaptation. There will be behavioral adaptation, and there may be metabolism, and performances will vary. Generally, both they get priority as a resistant animals during the harsh conditions. And generally, goats, they are having very skillful grazing behavior, browsing versus graze. Their small body size, higher digestive efficiency, lower metabolic requirements, and they have the ability to reduce metabolism. And this is very important for maintaining the heat. And moreover, they have the ability to conserve high fiber forests, higher absorption surface mucosa, and they can increase the volume of the foregut. And there are some effective urea recycling, and they can digest low protein feeds like non-protein nitrogenous substances very precisely. And moreover, they're efficient in using water, and goats, they're having large salivary glands. These are the advantages of goat, which can thrive better in extreme heat conditions. Moreover, the skin color of the animal, coat depth, and there are different thermoregulation, insulation, etc., which protect the animals from increased ambient temperature. Generally, the protecting from direct sunlight related to the coat color. And it is very obvious, generally, dark coat color, it absorbs more thermal radiation, and due to that, they are more susceptible to heat stress. And white or light brown color, they are better and more tolerant than dark brown or black. And in that way, by studying all these, we can adopt animals with climatic conditions. Coat depth and thermal radiation insulation, this is also very, very important. More airspace between hair fibers, it gives more insulation. So there are different type of wool types in sheep. Some are carpet type wool. It confers protection from solar radiation and effective cutaneous evaporation cooling as compared with other denser wool type. So long-haired goats, they tolerate better than short-haired goats. Optimum fleece length for thermoradiative protection is 40 mm. Thick fleece interferes with evaporative water loss from the skin. And again, another important thing, in case of semi-arid region or arid region, we have observed tail fat. It allows better heat dissipation than rest of the body, since the body becomes less insulated by the fat tissues. So when the stress increases, the loss also it increases. So there are some data. Generally, in case of mid-moderate stress, the milk it becomes less 0.57 kg per day in case of sheep, and 0.32 kg per day in case of dairy goat. In that way, as the stress increases, the production loss also increases. So this physiological behavioral changes, the ethology of animal behavior is very, very important in case of heat stress. So generally, in very hot climate, the animal bunching occurs in the set. So grazing time also it decreases. We know that grazing animals generally herbivore, they grazes almost 8 hours. But in that condition, their grazing time decreases. And they decreases locomotion and stubborning. There is dripping of copious saliva, which is a very common in heat stress, and panting and open mouth breathing. This is also common in case of the heat stress condition. So already we have shown it is having that moderate panting in case of sheep, and they are having open mouth breathing. So there will be increased respiration and cutaneous cooling during the severe dehydration. The feed intake will be decreased and water consumption will be increased. There will be decreased dry matter intake. Another important thing, the rumination time, it also decreased 76%. As you know, the rumination also, it increases temperature in case of animal. So there will be decreased digestive efficiency again. And in the heat stress condition, the urination and defecation also, it will be decreased. And moreover, some animals, they exhibit nocturnal activity in hot and arid conditions. In extreme cases, you can see lack of coordination and trembling of animals. So again, there will be some physiological responses which are essential to maintain normal body temperature and which prevent hypothermia. So during the heat stress, under the physiological responses, we see there will be aberration of reproductive functions and oxidative stress will be increased. There will be more production of reactive oxygen species, and there will be enzyme dysfunction, electrolyte imbalance, and as well as there will be endocrine imbalance will be there. And out of these indices, the respiration rate, heart rate, and rectal temperature will increase. So rectal temperature, it's a very critical condition. So in case of goat, generally the rectal temperature, it becomes between 39.2 to 39.8 degrees centigrade. So in case of sheep, it comes under 38.3 to 39.9 degrees centigrade. Again, it is pertinent to mention that that temperature, it may vary with different breed and adaptation of animals. When the rectal temperature increases up to 41 degrees centigrade in case of goat, it comes under heat stress. And again, in case of sheep, it increases 39.8, and we can consider it as a heat stress. So here it's coming 38.3, 39.9. So it is due to the different breed variation. So 1 degree centigrade rise or drop in rectal temperature reduces performance in most livestock sectors. So we know when there is 1 degree increase of the temperature, the milk secretion decreases 1 kg. So death may occur when rectal temperature exceeds 41.7 degrees centigrade. So in the same way, the heart rate also increases in heat stress conditions. These are the normal heart rate, and these are the heart rate of increased heart rate of heat stressed animals. And by increasing the heart rate, they try to cope up to maintain the or decreasing the heat stress. And again, the respiratory rate also, it will increase during the heat stress conditions. So panting increases and the respiratory rate increases, and it will try to evaporate or it will try to exit more amount of heat from the body through respiratory evaporation. Again, another important thing, there will be some molecular or cellular changes will occur due to the heat stress, and protein synthesis will decrease, though it is a transient changes. Decreased DNA synthesis will be there, but the process is very slow. So activation of heat shock factors, increased expression of heat shock proteins, and ultimately activation of endocrine and immune system will be there. And generally, in the heat stress condition, increased glucose and amino acid oxidation will be there, decreased fatty acid metabolism will be there. And this is one experiment of which we have done in our laboratory. So in normal temperature, we did in vitro maturation of oocytes, and again we matured the oocyte in vitro conditions by giving the heat stress, and heat stress was given 41 degrees centigrade, because beyond that there will be lysis of the cells or there will be apoptosis. So here we have seen the very prominent changes under transmission electron microscopy. The cortical granules will be migrated very well. So when we go for in vitro maturation of the oocytes, and in the heat stress conditions, we won't see any migration of the cortical granules. Maybe there will be lysis of the cortical granules. And again, in this F type, that cumulus expansion will be very clear. So here again, in the heat stress conditions, in the D slides, there will be no cumulus expansion. There may be lysis of the cumulus cells, and there may be apoptosis of the cumulus cells. And again, in the normal conditions, the oocyte, the mitochondria will be inside the endoplasmic reticulum, and here we could see the mitochondria within that endoplasmic reticulum, and there may be apoptotic conditions of the endoplasmic reticulum. This is that was one in vitro study, that effect of heat stress during oocyte maturation. So there may be again hematological and biochemical changes during the heat stress. RBC, WBC, hemoglobin, neutrophil, basophil, etc. All blood parameters will be increased, maybe due to hemoconcentration. And the same thing happened in case of sheep also. The enzyme will be decreased, alkaline phosphatase and lactate dehydrogenase in case of sheep. And it may be due to decreased thyroid activity. And proteins also, it will be decreased. In one cases, Dangi et al. 2012, they found albumin and globulin ratio decreases during the heat stress, which may be due to increased water in the plasma. And when the plasma volume increases, there will be lower total protein. And again, after evaporative heat loss, after dehydration, there may be total protein and albumin increased. And another observation was found by Okorowa et al. In 2014. So obviously, there will be hormonal changes during heat stress. Basically, there are three endocrine glands which are involved very much during the heat stress. So one will be the adrenal gland. So during the heat stress, there will be more production of glucocorticoids, and that glucocorticoids, it will hamper the overall system of the body, and that is also known as the stress hormone. And the thyroid gland also, it will be affected by this increasing heat stress, and there will be less conversion of T4 to T3, which is more potent biologically, and there will be decreased thyroid hormone activity and decreased thyroid hormone synthesis. And again, gonads will be affected very much during the heat stress. There will be less production of gonadotropic releasing hormone, and again, gonadotropic hormone, ultimately low FSH and LH, and these low hormone production, sex hormone production, ultimately affect all the reproductive system from ovulation, fertilization, conception, and it will affect spermatogenesis, spermiogenesis also. In case of electrolytes, the sodium, potassium, and chloride will be decreased in case of goats due to the severe sweating. And again, we have done one experiment. We studied the electrolyte changes in dehydration through electrocardiogram. And here we found there will be decreased sodium, decreased potassium, and decreased magnesium. In the ECG, when there will be less sodium, there will be ST elevation. And ultimately, there may be some defect in the atrioventricular conduction. And during increasing potassium, there we found tall T waves and progressive flat T waves and QRS complexes also. QRS complexes means ventricular depolarization. It also showed very broad structure, and there may be some right axis deviation of the heart. And these changes we found due to depression of the myocardial conduction due to increased potassium level. And again, due to decreased magnesium, there were some shortening the axon potential, and which was very, very prominent through ECG. So we can consider, we can use electrocardiogram also one way to assess the heat stress, because ECG, this is more commonly used non-invasive method in case of animals nowadays. So oxidative stress parameters also vary. There will be more production of free radicals during the heat stress. So antioxidants can be used for dissipation of heat stress in that condition. There may be immune depression in animals. So interestingly, the meat quality and carcass characteristics also, it will vary. So heat stress, it affects meat quality, carcass characteristics. There will be changes of pH, color, texture, and moisture. So again, during stress, adrenaline response stimulates peripheral vasodilation and muscles go for glycogenolysis. And if it is for longer period of time, then there will be high pH and meat color will be darker. Again, hypothermia before slaughter, it causes early and stronger rigor. So dehydrated animal when slaughtered, they will give darker meat and there will be myofibril syncrase, and these are the very prominent carcass characteristics in case of the heat stress conditions. So another one, the milk quality and quantity will be hampered. This is very, very important effect of the heat stress. During the heat stress, there will be a systemic changes on milk production, and there will be a local effect of decreased milk production. First, I'll discuss the local effect of reducing milk production. So when through hypothalamus, the heat stress will be there, and ultimately it will work on the adrenal cortex, and there will be releasing of cortisol, and that cortisol, it will stimulate the plasmin activator, which will be released from the mammary epithelial cells. And that plasmin activator, it activates the plasmin system, and beta casein will be degraded to 128 beta casein, and that 128 beta casein, which is also known as proteasopeptone channel blocking, And that 128 beta casein, it will block the channel system and ultimately inhibits the lactose and monovalent ion secretion. And that lactose inhibition and monovalent ion secretion inhibition will reduce the milk secretion. And this is a very important effect of stress hormone, and it causes very prominent decrease of milk secretion. In another way, again, the dopamine, which is released from the hypothalamus, it will causes less secretion of prolactin, and that prolactin also hampers the milk production, and there will be less secretion of milk. In both cases, there will be less secretion of milk, and this may cause transient metabolic energy surplus. And that transient metabolic energy surplus, ultimately, it will increase glucocorticoids, it will increase insulin, and ultimately, there will be mobilization of stored energy. So these are the two local and systemic effects of the heat stress, which causes decreased milk production. And moreover, milk composition also it affects. So generally in the heat stress condition, there will be no proper ratio of phosphate, pyruvate, and calcium and magnesium of the milk. And due to that imbalance ratio, so milk clotting occurs during the pasteurization or sterilization process. And again, there will be effect of water consumption. The small ruminants may experience moderate to severe water restriction during scare environmental conditions. Those sheep and goat otherwise are remarkable tolerant, especially goats. So due to the hormonal changes we have previously discussed, there will be effect on reproduction and fertility. The extreme ambient temperature, it causes abortion or fetal death, which is very common because during the heat stress condition, there will be diversion of circulation. We know the blood circulation diverted to the periphery, or there will be more heat dissipation is required. So there will be less circulation through the placenta towards the fetus. And this is the very common cause of abortion or fetal death due to the heat stress. Moreover, the prenatal growth will be hampered due to these conditions. And there will be decreased sexual behavior, decreased sexual activity, decreased sperm quality, poor conception. So we have done another experiment. We went for in vitro maturation of the oocytes in proper environment, proper temperature, and we give heat stress to these conditions. Then during the heat stress conditions, there will be very less growth of the oocytes. So effects of feed intake, interaction between stress and nutrition, nutrient deficiency ultimately lead to decreased feed intake, decreased phases of the digesta, and decreased blood flow to the rumen and phases in ruminal motility. Then the effect on hypothalamus feeding center, it causes hormonal response and decreased metabolic activity. Now we'll come to alleviating of heat stress, which is very important. So in case of the heat stress, shade is very, very important. It decreases impact of high solar radiation. A well-designed shade structure reduces heat load up to 50%. And preferably the low-cost, locally available material can be used instead of elaborate shelters. Another second important point for heat dissipation, there may be ration modifications. So changing in the feeding schedule and grazing time. We know the herbivores, they are generally spend more time, almost 8 hours for grazing. And they don't prefer grazing during the under the hot sunshine. So we can change their grazing time. We can allow them for grazing early in the morning or late evening. So feeding schedules also can be changed accordingly. Ration composition is very, very important. Dietary fiber adjustment should be done. Because we know propionic acid gives more heat production than acetic acid. So in that way, we have to give proper dietary fiber, use of high quality fiber forage, so increase energy density, supplemented protected fat, which may cause less heat production. We can use some feed additives like buffers, sodium bicarbonate, some antioxidant, niacin, vitamin A, vitamin C, etc., and yeast culture. So in vitro studies we have done by using different antioxidants and which very effectively decrease the production of oxidative free radicals, and in the field conditions also very effectively we can use different type of antioxidants for dissipate for less production of reactive oxygen species. So rehydration, which is very, very important, adequate, fresh and cool drinking water should be provided to the animals, and which is one of the most important requirements during the heat stress. So handling and activity of the animals should be controlled, and generally the milking should be done early in the morning or late evening. So transportation should be done early in the morning or late evening, and minimum handling should be done during the extreme hot time of the day. So adequate ventilation, another important thing, alteration of air temperature and velocity to modify microclimate of the animal. So we know microclimate, the climatic condition, the immediate vicinity to the animal. So if possible, installing fans and cooling system also should be done. Spraying and sprinkling water. This is a very, very important method for heat dissipation in animals. Direct wetting as an emergency measure. Spray and ventilation in heat stressed goats for 1 hour per day. It increased feed intake 18% and water intake 70%. Increased milk production 21%. Housing management, another important factor. Housing is fundamental to decrease radiation exposure. Appropriate farm site selection to enhance heat dissipation, and which will give a long-term benefits. Adequate space allowance and dung disposal are crucial aspects of dissipating heat. Genetic selection of the animals is very, very important. Selection of animals based on traits that govern interaction with the environment. So in the hot climatic conditions, the breed will be different. In the cold climatic conditions, there will be some different type of animals should be adopted, will perform better. So accordingly, we'll get full genetic expression of their potential. Farmers' knowledge, skills, and practice. Livestock handlers should have appropriate education and experience regarding the management of animals in heat conditions with good observational skills. And these are the managerial practices during the heat stress conditions of sheep and goat. Now we'll come to the cold stress. During the cold wave, the ambient temperature moves below the lower critical temperature and animal experiences cold stress. Lower critical temperature is the temperature at which the animal begins to feel cold and must increase heat production to stay warm. Maintain cold temperature, or else animals may move to hypothermia and eventually death may occur. And this is the picture: sheep frozen to death in Turkey in December 2013. Again, like heat stress assessment, we can assess the cold stress in case of animals. So that cold stress is quantified by wind chill index. Another important thing we have to see, so both they're having the same temperature at 3-degree temperature. When there will be wind chilling, will feel like -2 degrees centigrade. So air temperature is very lowering the air temperature is very important, like wind speed. So in this condition, to find out the wind chill index with air temperature, we have to take consideration of the wind speed of the environment. Effects of cold stress. First, they will show, the animals will show the behavioral responses. They will be huddling together. They will try to decrease the body surface area to conserve heat. And basically, in case of the cold stress conditions, two things we have to remember. Number one, there will be more production of heat, and number second, there will be less desiccation of heat. So first, there will be severe thermogenesis during the acute cold stress. So when the acute cold stress comes, there will be contraction of the piloerector muscles, and it will try to cause constriction and to lower the surface area, and moreover there will be vasoconstriction and blood vessels will be constricted. There will be severing condition for more energy generation and less dissipation of heat. After that, in chronic conditions, there will be non-severing thermogenesis. There will be involvement of different hormones, and these are increased iodothyronine, thyroxine, norepinephrine. And norepinephrine will cause constriction of the peripheral blood vessels, and thyroxine hormone T3 and T4, it will increase metabolism, and there will be decreased respiration rate to reduce evaporation loss. Pulmonary ventilation will be more intake of oxygen. Decreased evaporative heat loss through respiratory tract, reduced need for water consumption. There will be decreased rectal temperature, and in that condition, there will be some physiological adaptation in animals. There will be increased thermal insulation, appetite and basal metabolic intensity, and there will be alterations in the digestive functions. So again, in the heat stress conditions, we seen one ECG changes. This is a very interesting experiment. At -12 degrees centigrade and at -15 degrees centigrade, ECG shown a special Osborne or J wave, and which was found just before the ventricular repolarization. And that J wave, it increases the length of the cardiac cycle, and it causes distortion after the ventricular depolarization, and that distortion was seen before the ventricular repolarization. And moreover, bradycardia was very prominent during these conditions. The heart rate was decreased. Again, there will be effects of molecular and cellular responses. And interestingly, membrane fluidity induced membrane damage, and it was obvious in the cold stress condition. There will be more production of reactive oxygen species. There will be rapid overexpression of cold shock proteins. There will be increased expression level of SH227. though HSP27 was found in both heat stress condition and cold stress conditions, but SSP17 is more closely related to the cold tolerance. Again, there will be some hematological and biochemical changes. There will be increased hemoglobin condition, increased packed cell volume, increased total erythrocytic count, and total leukocytic count. And here, in case of the cold stress condition, the increased level of these blood parameters due to low level of oxygen concentration. So, in the high altitude region, with the cold stress, there will be some high altitude stress also, it will be there. And in that condition, the polycythemia was very common. There will be increased number of RBCs that will carry more amount of oxygen to compensate the decreased partial pressure of oxygen. Hormones T3 and T4 will increase and BMR will increase during the cold stress condition. Heat production will be increased for body temperature increasing, and there will be activation of hypothalamo-pituitary adrenal axis. In these conditions also, there will be increased level of glucocorticoids. But the thing is that the cold adapted animals have suppression of adrenal functions. So metabolites will be there, increased blood glucose level, increased fatty acids, and there will be increased albumin levels. So enzyme aspartate aminotransferase will be increased. Again, milk quantity and quality will be increased. Average milk yield decreases as the temperature declines due to decreased prolactin and growth hormone here. So another thing I didn't mention, in the heat stress conditions, there will be decreased milk production. It may be due to decreased thyroxine production. And again, in the cold stress condition, increased fat, protein, and lactose content in the milk. Feed intake will be increased to maintain the body temperature. Again, there will be reproduction and fertility. Here, the circulation will be diverted to the vital organs to protect them. And the peripheral circulation will be less, and the animal will suffer from frostbite. And frostbite is very common in the teeth area and in the tail area, etc. And if it is continuing for a longer period of time, in very, very cold conditions, there may be necrosis also. In the cold stress conditions also, ration modifications is very, very important. Adequate feeding should be there for increased metabolic demands. Energy content, it should be increased. And protein content also, it has to be increased. Combination of salt and fat can be added to the diet. Here we have to maintain one thing. Due to salt intake, there may be salt toxicity during the winter season. So to compensate these, the water, though the water intake it decreases during the winter, we have to provide more water to the animal. And for that, tank heaters can be used to prevent water from freezing. And rations constituting about 20% as compared to 17% fiber are helpful to increase fat percentage in milk and reduce the effects of cold temperature. And there should be provision of hay, silage, feed blocks, and urea molasses supplementation. We have to keep it ready from before for extreme cold conditions, and handling activity should be done after seeing the climatic conditions, and lambing and feeding can be planned after extreme cold conditions. The ventilation should be limited. This is very important point. After milking, drying teats is very important to reduce freezing injury. Animals to be kept dry as wet coats have reduced insulating properties, and Gummy bags should be ready by making some jackets or blankets. Another, infrared thermography can be used to monitor animals' climatic conditions, temperature. So that is infrared thermography. That is a non-invasive method. It can be put into nose or ear, and we can observe we can continuously monitor the temperature of the animal. Housing management during cold condition, it's important. While making the shade, it should be east to west orientation to utilize maximum sunshine hours. Walls to be constructed with insulating materials, bricks and stones. Use of windbreaks or vegetation should be done. Use of dry bedding, plastering on the outer surface, slanting roofs to allow snow to slide down. And genetic selection of animals, this is one of the very, very important factor, both in heat stress condition and in cold stress conditions. As per climatic conditions of the state, they should adopt the policy to keep specific breeds which are suitable for their own state. And they can give maximum, they can express their maximum genetic potentialities. So climatic change is for real, and the only effective approach to combat it is adopting appropriate managerial strategies. However, for sustainable livestock production system under changing climatic scenario, it's important some adequate ameliorative principle requires. And for that, basic animal physiology knowledge and their adaptive fundamentals are very, very important. And all veterinarians, meteorologists, nutritionists, and local agricultural organization, scientists, they all have to work together for successful include all the factors for proper policy making, and for their combined effort only they can protect the animals from drastic climate changes. And moreover, we have to aware the farmers to increase their knowledge and skills in factories, and we have to teach them the different symptoms and different conditions of the climatic stress, and we have to train them how to protect their animals from extreme climatic conditions. So thank you all